The Last Shift at Station 12, Part 1, Rain in Ashwood. The rain just wouldn't stop in Ashwood, a small town deep in Ohio, surrounded by thick woods and that constant feeling like time had just stopped. That night, the water hit hard against the windows of the old Station 12, a dark brick building that seemed to be standing only out of stubbornness. The clock showed 10:47 p.m. when Sergeant William Bill Carter walked through the front doors, shaking off his soaked coat. Bill was used to the loneliness of the night shifts. After almost 30 years in the force, he'd left the patrol work behind, but still showed up for a few night shifts. Keeps the mind busy, he used to say, but everyone knew it was more because he had nowhere else to be. His wife passed away 4 years ago. The kids moved to other states, and most of his friends either retired or passed on. All that was left were the empty halls of Station 12 and the occasional company of a stale cup of coffee. But that night, something felt different. Bill noticed it as soon as he walked in, the metallic smell of rain mixed with something else. Sour, old. He stopped in the entryway and looked around. The flickering fluorescent lights above buzzed softly. He grabbed the radio from the front desk and tried to reach the county dispatch. Unit 12 to dispatch. Anything going on around this area? Over. Nothing but static and the sound of the rain. No answer. Bill frowned, adjusted his belt, and headed to the monitoring room. The outdoor cameras showed the parking lot. Empty, except for his own car. Inside, everything looked normal, until one feed blinked. The camera at the far end hallway where the old unused holding cell was, glitched for a second. When the image came back, the cell door, which should have been sealed shut, was slightly open. No way, he muttered. That door was welded shut. He got up slowly and pulled a baton from the drawer. He didn't really expect to find anyone, but something just felt off. The hallway was dim, and the sound of the rain seemed farther away down there. As he approached the cell, he saw it really was open. No signs of forced entry, just open. He pulled his flashlight from the holster and aimed it inside. Nothing but the old concrete bed, the rusted toilet, and walls covered in scratches and writing. But one thing caught his eye. On the back wall, written in charcoal, were the words, "He's still here." Bill took a step back. He didn't remember that being there, and he knew every inch of that cell. He pointed the flashlight down and saw wet footprints on the floor, like someone had just walked in from the inside. He hurried back to the monitor room and rewound the camera footage. Before the glitch, nothing. Then suddenly, the door was open, and a shadow moved in the back. Probably just a tech glitch, he muttered. But deep down, he knew better. He headed to the file cabinet, grabbed the spare key to the basement, and made his way down the creaky stairs. The basement was just for old equipment, records, and confiscated junk from decades ago. It was thick with moisture, and that smell from earlier, like something rotten, was stronger down there. He flipped on the emergency light and walked through the narrow aisles, guided by some uneasy instinct. Passed by old uniforms, a row of busted radios, and finally reached a door chained shut. "Sealed property. Do not open without sheriff's permission," the sign warned. That was the room that, according to old stories, held stuff connected to the Holloway case, a string of murders that rocked Ashwood back in the 70s. The main suspect, Thomas Holloway, was locked up right here, in cell 3. The same cell Bill had just found open. Holloway was found dead in that very cell before his trial, but some folks said part of him, or something with him, never left. Bill paused. The chain was rusty, easy to snap, and for some reason he felt like he had to open that door. With some effort, he broke the chain using a crowbar from the nearby cabinet. The door creaked open, revealing a dark room full of dusty boxes and shelves with old files. But right in the center, under a tarp, was something big. He pulled back the tarp carefully and uncovered a restraining chair. the kind they used in old psychiatric hospitals. Shackles on the arms and legs, and on the backrest, carved deep into the metal, Thomas Holloway, 1977. Before he could react, a loud metallic clink echoed through the basement, the lights flickered, and then a whisper. Bill. The old sergeant spun around, heart racing, but the hallway behind him was empty, or maybe not. A shadow darted past at the far end of the corridor. "Who's there?" he shouted, flashlight raised. Nothing. But he knew. He knew the night was just beginning. And maybe he wasn't alone at Station 12. Part 2. The Lost Tapes. The rain kept falling over Ashwood like a heavy curtain, muffling all the sounds of the night. Back at Station 12, Bill climbed up from the basement, his face pale and his body tense. Every step echoed through the empty hallways like he wasn't alone, and deep down he knew he wasn't. Back in the monitoring room, he locked the door and sat down in front of the cameras, trying to make sense of what he'd just seen. Something was very wrong in that station, and if he wanted to keep his sanity, he needed to follow the instinct of a seasoned cop, find proof, look for answers. But part of him also knew maybe this wasn't about logic anymore. On the shelf above the desk, he spotted a box of old tapes, interrogation recordings from the 70s and 80s. Most were faded or demagnetized, but one caught his eye. The worn label read, "Holloway, Confession." He popped the tape into the old player and adjusted the controls. The hiss filled the room before a rough, slow-accented voice came on the recording. Interviewer: "Mr. Holloway, why did you do those things to the children?" Holloway, calm voice: "I didn't do anything. They came to me. They were already marked." Bill's chest tightened. He turned up the volume. Interviewer: "Marked by who?" Holloway: "You don't understand. I only stopped him from coming. The cell protected me, but now you've opened it." The recording cut off with a high-pitched screech, like the tape had been scratched. Bill stepped back from the desk, sweating cold. He didn't know any official report confirming a confession. That tape was a mystery, and the most disturbing thing, Holloway's voice wasn't guilty. It was scared. Trying to find more, Bill searched through the old records on the station system. He typed Holloway and started digging through scanned documents. One file, poorly indexed, popped up with the title Internal Memo 0304-1978. The document said that after Thomas Holloway's death, 3 officers who worked the case asked for immediate transfers or disability retirement. One claimed he heard Holloway's voice calling his name at night. Another just disappeared. Before Bill could read more, a loud bang shook the station. He jumped up and grabbed his flashlight. The sound came from the front desk. When he got there, the front door was open. Impossible. He'd locked it with the manual latch, and no keys had been taken. Rain now poured in through the cracks, pooling on the floor. And right in the middle of the water, there were footprints, bare feet, small like a child's. Bill followed the trail with his eyes, leading down the west hallway, where the Holloway case files were stored. Keeping his breath steady, he followed the wet steps to the last door on the right. Dead files. He turned the knob. It was locked, but under the door the light was on. "No one turned that on," he murmured, pulling out his keys. The door creaked open painfully. The room smelled of mold and old paper, but on the filing table lay a manila envelope, one of those old evidence envelopes marked Inmate Statement, Unofficial Confession, T. Holloway. Bill opened it and pulled out a typewritten sheet. Bill. He's not a man. He lives between spaces, between walls, between mirrors, between the words left unsaid. He found me when I was a kid, and ever since, he's followed me. I tried locking him inside with me, but you opened the door. Now he's coming for another. A chill ran up Bill's spine as he finished reading. In the reflection of the small glass window on the door, he saw it, a shadow behind him. He spun around in a flash. Nothing but the smell. That same sour smell, stronger now, almost choking. His radio on his belt crackled by itself. Bill! The sergeant dropped to his knees. His name. That thing was calling him. But how could it know? He hadn't told a soul he'd heard that voice earlier, or maybe it never stopped. Part 3. Between the Walls. Bill's mind was still stuck on those words from the unofficial confession. He lives between the spaces, between the words not said. Standing there in the dead files room, he felt every second dragging on. The rain outside was heavier now, like the whole world was trying to hide what was coming. Bill closed the envelope and stepped back into the hallway. Something in the air had changed. The station didn't just feel empty anymore. It felt like it was watching him. As he walked back to the main room, the lights started flickering. First one at a time, then all at once. He stopped, stayed still, and then he realized this wasn't an electrical problem. It was a presence. The radio crackled again. Static, and then between the wall, this time Bill clearly heard something moving. Not in the halls, but inside the walls, like someone or something was crawling through the plaster, the pipes, between beams and wires. His gut told him to run back to the monitoring room. He needed to check the cameras. He sat down in front of the screens. Everything looked normal until he zoomed in on the basement camera. It was dark, but something was moving. He turned up the brightness and contrast. There, with its back to the camera, stood someone in the middle of cell 4, the same cell Holloway was in, a tall man in a dark suit. Still, like he was waiting. "This can't be," Bill whispered. He had locked the basement himself, and no one could have gotten in without setting off the alarm. He grabbed his radio and called dispatch. "Unit 12, calling dispatch. I need backup immediately. Possible intruder in the cells. Cameras caught someone inside cell 4. Repeat, intruder in the cells." The radio stayed silent. No sound, not even static. It was like he was talking into empty air. With no other choice, he grabbed his flashlight and gun and headed to the basement. Each step made the wooden floor creak. The whole station seemed to be breathing with him. At the basement door, he stopped. The doorknob was wet, and when he touched it, the hallway lights flickered again. Then everything went dark. He went down step by step, guided only by the flashlight. The cell hallway was completely quiet, but as he got closer to cell 4, he heard whispers. At first, he couldn't understand them. Then they became clearer. "You opened. He can't be contained. You were chosen." His flashlight started to flicker, and then the cell appeared in front of him. It was open. Inside, something strange was on the floor. A circle of scratched marks on the concrete, like someone or many had scratched until they bled. In the middle, shoe prints, but also bare footprints, child-sized, just like the ones seen at the front desk. "This makes no sense," he whispered, and then he heard the voice again. Not on the radio, not on the tape, behind him. "Bill!" He spun around fast, but there was no one. Then he noticed the back wall of cell 4 looked wrong, crooked, like it was pulsing. When he got closer, he saw a narrow opening, hidden for decades, like a secret passage between the wall and the outside structure. Bill shined his light inside, a tight space, rough concrete, damp, covered in old scratches made by nails or bits of metal. He stepped in. The air was thicker there. The flashlight went out every few seconds, and each time the light flickered, he saw things, shadows, eyes, twisted faces. At the end of the passage, he found a small round room, like an old chamber. In the middle, a rusty metal chair, broken chains. On the walls, symbols he didn't recognize. And on the floor, a deep mark, like a burn. An irregular circle, darkened, made by something very old. The flashlight went completely out. In total darkness, he heard breathing. Not his own. Something was there. And then a guttural, twisted voice, like it came from inside the stone itself, whispered in his ear, "You saw me, now I see you." Bill screamed and ran. Back through the narrow passage, stumbling, falling, scraping his arms on the concrete. When he got out of the cell, he slammed the door shut. The basement lights came back on. But he knew nothing would ever be the same. What was between the walls was free now. Part 4. Echoes from the Past. Bill locked the cell with shaking hands. Sweat ran down his face, mixed with tunnel dust and the metallic smell of rust. He climbed the stairs without looking back, not caring about the sounds following him. Scratches on the walls, unclear whispers, and soft bare footsteps behind him. Back in the main hallway, he leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. Everything in his mind screamed to leave the station, leave it all, drop the keys, and run into the rainy night until his lungs burst. But he knew, if he left now, it would follow him. It was inside him. He had been seen, marked, chosen. In the monitoring room, the cameras now showed distortions. Images flickered, jumped, and played backwards. On one screen, Bill saw himself sitting at the table, even though he was standing there watching the recording. On another, cell 4 was full of people, pale faces, empty eyes, staring right at the monitor. Bill shut down the system. He needed to understand. He needed to know what this place was hiding. He remembered the city files, a folder he had catalogued years ago with old stories, founding reports, unsolved incidents. If there was an explanation, it was there. He opened the dusty folder and started flipping through the documents. A 1947 report mentioned a previous structure on the same spot where the station was built. Something called Ash Valley Inpatient Hospital closed in the 1930s after a series of disappearances and reports of cruel treatments. Another newspaper clipping from 1952 told of a cop who went crazy during a night shift, saying the walls were talking and that there was someone living in the concrete. Further down, he found something that made him stop breathing for a second. A black and white photo from 1929, taken during an excavation for the foundation. In the background, an old circular stone wall with burn marks like the ones he saw in the secret room. The caption said, "Discovery of pre-colonial structure under Ash Valley, believed to be an ancient pagan shrine." Work was stopped for 3 weeks after 2 workers disappeared. Bill dropped the photo. Everything made sense now. Or better said, nothing made sense, but he could see the invisible threads tying the events. Holloway, the kids, the footprints, the cell, the symbols. The station was built on top of something old, something that should never have been awakened. A soft knock on the window broke his thoughts. He slowly turned. Outside, through the glass covered in raindrops, someone stood. Still. A tall man in a dark suit, like the one from the recordings. Bill walked closer. The man raised his hand and pressed it against the glass, slowly, like he wanted to be noticed, but the face was Bill's own face. Thunder exploded in the sky, and in a flash, the figure disappeared. Stunned, Bill stepped back. Then the station's lights went out again. Everything went dark. Only the sound of rain, and then the radio. "Shift's over. Time to go home, Bill." But he hadn't turned the radio on. Part 5, the ending. The station was plunged in darkness. Bill felt his way in the dark to the main desk, grabbing the emergency flashlight. The weak light showed the room partly twisted. Shadows seemed to move on their own, like the building itself was alive, breathing in a strange rhythm. He walked down the cell hallway. Cell 4 was open, empty, but there was something written on the wall, in dark, sticky paint, still fresh. "You should not have come in." A chill ran down his spine. This was no longer just fear. It touched his mind, his thoughts, making him doubt his own sanity. Time seemed to bend. His thoughts mixed memories and visions of things that had not happened yet. The basement door creaked open. He didn't want to go down. He knew what was there, but something pushed him mentally, like he was being led by an ancient force. Each step seemed deeper than the last. The tunnel now pulsed in red tones, like lit from inside by a living, breathing light. The walls whispered in forgotten tongues. The marks on the floor glowed. At the central chamber, Bill saw something new, a stone altar covered with symbols and burning candles, even though no one had lit them. In front of the altar, a figure waited. It was Holloway, or something like him. The eyes were completely black, the mouth open in a strange smile. The thing spoke with many voices. "You accepted the call. Now you're one of us." Bill tried to step back, but his feet were stuck. Invisible chains held him still. The figure raised its arms, and all the candles went out at once. The sound vanished. Then, silence was broken by a single phrase, whispered straight into Bill's mind. "The station needs a new guardian. Light, noise, movement." Bill woke up sitting at the reception desk. The morning sun shone through the windows. The town was back to normal. No sign of the tunnel, no Holloway, no files. He looked at the clock. 7:59 a.m. His shift was over, or so they said. The radio crackled. "Good morning, Station 12, quiet night, Bill." But there was no one on the radio, no one in the building. Bill smiled faintly. He stood up, walked slowly to the logboard and wrote in his own handwriting, "Night shift, Officer Bill Granger, present." Then he locked the door. Outside, the town went on as usual. But inside the station, echoes from the past still lived. And now, they had a new guardian,